Two separate vehicles will count down for the 6th Gemini flight, Atlas Agena on Pad 14 and Gemini VI on Pad 19, Cape Kennedy. The Atlas Agena will be launched first at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. 9 minutes later, Agena will be inserted into a circular orbit at an altitude of 185 statute miles. 1 hour, 40 minutes, and 52 seconds after the Agena launch, and time is now measured in seconds, Gemini will be launched from Pad 19. If the spacecraft is not launched within 35 seconds of the recommended liftoff, the rendezvous point will slip approximately 1 orbit for each 100 seconds of delay. The Agena, a versatile spacecraft in its own right, has been specially modified as a target vehicle for the first rendezvous and docking mission. An obvious addition was a docking adapter at the forward end. The Agena also carries a transponder to receive radar signals from Gemini. It strengthens these signals and returns them to the spacecraft. The Agena's command link makes it possible to maneuver the target vehicle from either the ground or the spacecraft to meet major variations in the flight plan. The flight plan calls for Agena to be in a circular orbit of 185 statute miles. Gemini will be inserted into another orbit with a perigee or low point of 100 miles and an apogee or high point of 168 miles. As it approaches its first apogee over the coast of Australia, Gemini will trail the Agena by some 950 miles. Since it is in a smaller orbit than Agena, Gemini immediately begins catching up. The crew of Gemini will check out their systems during the first revolution and perform a small altitude maneuver over Texas to adjust the orbit. On the second spacecraft revolution, the command pilot will perform the first of 4 basic in-plane maneuvers to effect rendezvous and docking. These 4 maneuvers are a first phasing maneuver, raising perigee, circularization of the orbit, first terminal maneuver for closure, and a braking maneuver. At apogee, the command pilot fires his aft thrusters to increase spacecraft velocity 36.5 miles per hour. Applying energy in the direction of flight at the apogee raises the perigee. The apogee remains the same. Raising perigee gradually slows down the catch-up rate. As a result, Gemini 6 will be in a 134 by 168 mile orbit. This perigee altitude can be varied to allow Gemini to arrive at the rendezvous point in the 4th orbit. But the Agena and spacecraft may not be circling the Earth in the same orbital plane. We can best illustrate this by a side view. To correct this, the command pilot will now perform an out-of-plane maneuver. He fires his attitude thrusters to rotate the spacecraft at right angles to the flight path. At the point of intersection of the 2 orbital planes, the command pilot fires his thrusters to put Gemini in the same plane with Agena. During the 3rd spacecraft pass, about 3½ hours after launch, the command pilot will acquire the Agena with his radar. He has been gradually catching up with Agena and is now some 230 miles behind. Continuing the radar track, the command pilot performs the 2nd, or circularization maneuver, near Tananarive. He again fires his aft thrusters, adding 35.6 miles an hour velocity, and again he raises his perigee. Spacecraft perigee now equals the apogee. The orbit of Gemini 6 is 168 miles above the Earth. The orbit has been made circular to assist the crew. If the nominal plan for rendezvous changes, they will have the same terminal approach to the target vehicle. From any point along the orbit, they will employ the same basic velocity values and angular corrections. The spacecraft has caught up until it is now only 17 miles below and 161 miles behind the Agena. The command pilot turns his computer to rendezvous mode. The computer translates radar data into rendezvous information on the command pilot's panel for his use in firing the thrusters. But even if the radar and computer go out, the crew could still complete the rendezvous. Gemini 6 again enters the dark side of the Earth. About 5 hours after launch, the mission now enters the terminal rendezvous phase. Gemini 6 is catching up at approximately 1.8 miles a minute. The command pilot points the nose of Gemini toward his target vehicle. The Agena is seen against a background of stars with two flashing acquisition lights. Along the line of sight with Agena, the command pilot fires his aft thrusters, increasing his velocity approximately 22.5 miles per hour. Gemini 6 is now on an intercept course. Two small velocity corrections will probably be needed. These will place Gemini slightly ahead of the Agena, its nose facing the docking adapter. Now, using semi-optical techniques, the command pilot performs his final major velocity maneuver. He fires his thrusters in a braking maneuver to equal the velocity of Agena. Both vehicles are in the same orbit. Gemini 6 is now in position for docking. Floodlights light up the interior of the cone. The command pilot nudges the nose of Gemini toward the Agena with small thrust pulses. Gemini comes into position gently. Latches in the cone lock the two vehicles in a rigid position or dock. After a successful dock, the command pilot will back away from Agena. Throughout the following revolutions, both command pilot and pilot will conduct redocking exercises. Some experiments are scheduled in the docked and undocked configuration. Upon their completion, the command pilot will perform a separation maneuver and continue the mission. We have presented a brief and almost theoretical plan that does not account for all the complexities which may be faced by the crew in actual rendezvous in space. A rendezvous and docking maneuver which is an essential condition for lunar landings and return from the moon.